Have you ever come to the end of a really good TV series and thought, what next? What do I watch next that will top that? Well, recently I just finished watching Line of Duty. If you haven't watched it, go and watch it. There'll be no spoilers here, but it's a great series. And when I got to the end of watching Line of Duty, all 6 series, I thought to myself, what next? Where do I go from here? And we can ask that question an awful lot in life. And the tone of how we ask that question can change its meaning entirely. For example, if you're eating a scrumptious box of chocolates and you look and you have one and then you're looking again and you say, oh, what next? That's a very certain way of using that word, that phrase. But if you've had a bad day and you're struggling and one thing seems to be going wrong after another and you say, oh, what next? It has a very different meaning. And after the last 18 months or so that we've had as a country and as a world and as individuals, we can find ourselves asking that question in all its forms. What next? And it's quite an important question to ponder, I think, and to think about. And so today, as we think about that question, what next? We're going to look at the disciple Peter. Now, I love Peter because Peter made mistakes. I don't like thinking about perfect people because I'm not a perfect person. And when I look at Peter, I see someone who made mistakes and yet was still all out committed to following the Jesus way, even though he often got it wrong. And so we're going to look at Peter, and we're going to look at a specific moment in Peter's life. And this moment comes in John 21, the verses that we've just heard. After Jesus has been killed, after Peter has denied Jesus, after he has risen again, Peter meets Jesus again on a beach. And we're going to look at all of this, what Peter went through, where he was, and what did he do next. And as we look at what Peter did next, it's really fascinating to see how this hero of the faith, this person that was called the rock on which his church would be built, this is what he did next. He went fishing. Verse 3 says, in Peter's own words, I'm going fishing. Often when we don't know what to do next, when that question, what next, comes to mind, and we're at a loss and we've been through difficulties or we're feeling burnt out, we return to what we know. It's a natural thing to do. And so Peter decided to go back fishing. Now for him, that used to be his livelihood before Jesus. And this is why it's so important, because it's a little bit like Peter has taken a step backwards. He's gone, I don't know what to do next. Let's just go back to what I know. And sometimes when we go through grief and we go through trauma and we go through difficulties, like Peter had, he denied Jesus. He'd seen his friend be killed, and then he was grappling with the fact that Jesus had risen from the dead, no small thing to grapple with. He was trying to work out what all this meant and what it meant for him, a failed disciple. And so what does he do? He goes back to what is comforting and safe. He goes back to what he knows. He goes back fishing. What next for Peter? I'm going to go back to what I know. And sometimes when we face difficulties in life, when we face trauma or grief or disappointment, or we feel that we've got things wrong, we can retreat back to what we know. Sometimes we want to return and hide to what is safe and comfortable. And sometimes when we just don't know what to do, we just go back to what we know. And that's exactly what Peter did. And it's interesting to note that in this passage, this comes after the disciples have seen Jesus at least 3 times. The previous chapter, Jesus appears to the disciples, Peter's there, and this is what Jesus says to them. He says, peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, so I am sending you. Then he breathed on them and said, receive the Holy Spirit. If you forgive anyone's sins, they're forgiven. If you do not forgive them, they are not forgiven. That's what had happened the chapter before. And yet, here is Peter, not looking terribly sent. He's back on a boat, returning to what he knows. But the incredible thing is this, even though Peter, in my humble opinion, was floundering over what to do next, the other disciples still followed him. Even though Peter had lost, I think, quite a lot of belief and confidence in himself, the other disciples still looked to him as a leader. He said, I'm going fishing. And the rest of them went, hang on a minute, let's grab our nets and come with you. They still followed him, even though he, I think, was floundering a little bit. Maybe Peter asked himself that question. What next? What on earth does a failed disciple do next? Someone who has let Jesus down so incredibly. Even though he's seen Jesus appear to him back from the dead, Jesus has risen again and actually walked into the room and been with Peter and said, "Peace be with you," and given the Holy Spirit. Peter still goes back fishing. Maybe he thought that he was so bad, so unworthy, that he was disqualified from following Jesus. Maybe he just didn't know what to do and how to go about it. I wonder if you've ever felt like that. Maybe you felt disqualified or unworthy. Perhaps you've just felt burnt out by life. I know that over the last 18 months, a lot of people have felt burnt out by the monotony of how life has been. Maybe Peter felt like that, and not knowing what to do next, just went back to what he knew. I once heard someone say this about Peter. They said that Peter had lost all belief in himself after denying Jesus, but Jesus had not stopped believing in Peter. Now, we often talk about how we believe in Jesus, but this person really got me thinking about how Jesus actually believes in each and every one of us, in the potential that we have to live life his way. That's why he doesn't just leave us. He keeps on constantly coming back and saying, "You can do this," encouraging us and helping us to live lives the way that he has lived so we can follow him. And that's why he appeared back to Peter on the beach. That's why he encouraged him that he could do this. We read in chapter 21 that Jesus asked Peter 3 times, "Do you love me?" And he goes on to give Peter instructions. And even though Peter feels hurt that he had to ask 3 times, actually what Jesus is doing is he's building Peter back up and saying, even though you may not believe in yourself, I believe in you. You have a job to do. You have an incredible future ahead of you. You're going to tell hundreds and thousands of people about me. Peter may have lost belief in himself, but Jesus had not lost belief in Peter for 1 second. What does it mean for us? What does it mean for us that Jesus believes in me and believes in you? That he sees the immense potential for your life and for my life? That when he looks at us, he doesn't see failures. He doesn't see people who've been disqualified. He sees incredible people that he helped create who can do incredible things for him. What does that mean for you and for me? It means that when we ask the question, what next? We've actually got Jesus by our side, cheering us on and encouraging us to keep on going, to keep moving forward, not backwards. And even though sometimes we may need to rest, it means that he's there by our side, supporting us each step of the way. We often talk about how we believe in Jesus, but how incredible is it to think that he also believes in us, that he longs to restore us, that he longs to put back together our broken pieces, just like Peter, who had been so broken by his denial. Yet Jesus longed to put him back together, restore him, so that he could go on to follow and live life his way, the Jesus way. And the second point is this.